Are any other questions out there? Okay, over here.
I guess for the students and also everyone else, but can you just talk a little bit about your experience right after college and kind of where you want to be,
I'll start working away. The question was experience after college, and sort of where you went and how you got to where you are. I got out of college, knew I wanted to be a lawyer, went to law school, became a prosecutor, then was a defense attorney, and I was a trial lawyer. I tried everything from death penalty cases to antitrust cases, and actually stumbled into television. After I had defended, I mentioned that the first death penalty case in the Northeast that had gotten an enormous amount of attention. The U.S. Supreme Court had done away with the death penalty in the early 70s, and now it was starting to come back. So this is in 1983. And because it was the first death penalty in the Northeast, we had cameras in the courtroom and a lot of media attention. And when it was over, I did an interview with the CBS affiliate in New York City, Channel 2. And we finished the interview, and the news director came up to me and he said, "You seem pretty comfortable. Have you done TV before?" And I said, "My coach at Yale had a weekly New England show on." And I actually put myself through law school on Jeopardy. I was on Jeopardy 3 times, and I won a whole bunch of money to pay for law school. So I said to him, "Well," I said, "that's my experience. I was on Jeopardy 3 times, and I did." And he said, "Well, how'd you like to come work for us? You know, be our legal analyst." So it's, you know, when I talk to people, it's interesting, and they talk about careers, and I say so much of opportunities in your lifetime are opportunities that show up that you had not planned for at all. So I ended up transitioning from being a lawyer into a 20-some-year career in television. And you know, I say to people, you know, people say, "Well, how did you plan for it?" I said, "I didn't, but what I had was my Yale experience." And I think what Yale teaches you, and we were talking about the poise of Yale students, and you know, it's so much more than what your grade point average is. And one of the great, I think, things about coming from a place like Yale is you have learned to be successful. And that can lend itself to whatever either you choose to do or whatever you stumble into. And in my case, it was literally stumbling into a second career.
Yeah, I guess the other thing I would add is, you know, even for those of you who are seniors, even coming from Yale, it's still a pretty tough time right now out in the job market. And so there's just a lot of uncertainty in the world today. And I think that's probably going to be with us for some time, the uncertainty and the change. So my advice to you would be, which is probably different than your life up until this point, is try not to figure it all out, because it's not logical that you can. You're not going to know when that door is going to open, what form it might take. So I think you kind of have to go with it. And you have to have an open mind to being open to all kinds of opportunities. Because it just might manifest itself in a form that you're not sure about. So my encouragement would be to try stuff, to be open to lots of different ideas. Your first job's probably not going to be your dream job. My daughter mistook my advice of, you know, go for the dream job as her first job should be the dream job. And I'm like, no, it doesn't work that way. It takes like a couple of steps and you work towards your dream job. So, you know, just kind of try things. And the other thing that I would say is kind of figure out what cranks your engine. You know, what gets you fired up when you wake up in the morning? And I kind of know what that is for me. And so when I counsel folks, I say, look for those things that kind of crank your engine up. If you stay close to your passions, you'll probably do really good work. If you get too far away from it, and if you're doing something you just don't really like for too long, that's probably not a good idea either. But you guys have so much going for you. You're talented, you're bright, you've got great accomplishment. As Jack said, you've learned to be successful. You know, you're going to do fine, but it might just be a little cloudy at the beginning. When I first started my job, I went from here to Mobile, Alabama, and the first year I wanted to quit. And I remember calling home and saying, I hate this. I want to come home. And my mom, who is also my hero, although she's crazy, she's like, you can't. You know, in a year, if you're unhappy, come back, but you haven't given it enough time. So there's maybe a little bit of a paradox. Advice I said, if you really don't like it, you know, don't stay with it, but stay with it long enough to work through the tough patches, and you'll all be fine. And last piece, set your bar high. Don't settle.
So I graduated into the Vietnam War. And I remember sitting in our dorm room where we had a TV set around whenever they had this thing called the draft lottery that determined whether you were going to have a number that was high enough to be drafted or not. And I got a low number. I was going to be drafted. And my draft board was a Great Neck. For those of you who know Great Neck, there weren't a lot of options that I was going to be drafted. There was no doubt. So that made me decide that, you know, I could go to medical school, I could go to law school, but I better go to medical school. It was just like that. I had the courses, I'll apply. It wasn't like I didn't think I could do that, but, you know, there are lots of good options. Probably, I don't know, if there weren't the war, maybe I wanted to do something like constitutional law, but it wasn't going to happen. So I applied to medical school, and there was this new medical school that only had 40 students a class, and that was Mount Sinai. And it was probably a brief psychotic moment that I decided that I go there. I mean, I was interviewing at all these places, and at the end of each of the interviews, they would say something like, you know, well, you'll hear from us. And like, that was typical. I went to this new place, and at the end of the day, they called me into the dean of admissions and said, how would you like to go here? Remember, this is the 60s. I said, okay, it's a deal. So that's where I went. And within 3 months of getting there, I thought, I have made the worst decision of my life. This is a catastrophe. I mean, this new school doesn't know from up what it's doing. And compared to what was a Yale education, and by the last 2 years of Yale, I was mostly in small seminars, and I thought that in a class of 40 students, they would teach medicine in that tutorial, small group way, which is what they said to me would be like. And in fact, because it was a new school, they did it the most conservative, traditional way. I was appalled. I mean, we would sit in a group of 40 students and have one guy lecturing to us like we were a classroom of 300. So I was very upset, and being me, I started a student newspaper that railed against the faculty. And, you know, it was so grim that faculty would come over to me and say things like, you know, you keep this up, you're never going to wind up with an internship. You know, what paradox, now I run the place. But what happened that made a big difference in my life is, for the same reason Jack didn't have distributionals, education was changing. It changed in the middle of Yale for me, from, you know, grades, A, B, C, D, to pass-fail honors, to, you know, you had to take a language, you had to take a science, and you had to take everything to, you know, hang out, take your courses. So medical school got kind of that way. And the afternoons were completely free. And I found the pharmacology department that was doing neuroscience. And I spent every afternoon doing brain research. And it was like the most fun thing I'd ever done. So I just was able to, by chance, find out what I really loved and stuck with it. And I knew that I was going to be a psychiatrist who was going to deal with how people got crazy, because it was so fascinating to me. I think, you know, looking back on how it all happened, it might not have happened had I not had the confidence that Yale gave me from 4 years here, that I could do anything. And if I said that, you know, the school sucked and I was going to write a newspaper about it, they'd have to deal with me, because I thought I was right.